internet worms, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I am going to do a library book haul today, as well as what I'm currently reading. So I live out in the country now. My library that I go to is a very small library. It's not connected to the county library here, so I don't get to have as large a connection to the library materials as I did previously when I worked in a county library and I had millions of books at my fingertips. So I have to go to different libraries. I mainly go to one other library because they have a fairly big library collection, and I don't really have to use the other couple cards that I got while I was up here. It's been kind of hard getting a library card because of COVID and moving and such, because they were having protocols about who could and couldn't get library cards, and some people just didn't have the ability to apply for library cards open for a while. But anyway, so I have a library book haul from two different libraries. The one I currently work at, as I said, the little country library, and then the other one. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about what I'm currently reading, which is Furious Hours by Casey Sepp, Murder, Fraud, and the Last Trial of Harper Lee. So far, this is really good. I started this on Tuesday, and I'm about halfway through it. Oh, and by the way, look at my cute little card, bookmark. Happiness is a warm puppy in a good book. I love that one. So this book is divided into 3 parts. The first part talks about a man called William Maxwell. He is, or was, a reverend and did a couple side jobs. He committed murder and insurance fraud. He would take out insurance on different family members, and then they would mysteriously die and they couldn't prove it. But everyone knew that he did do it, and they all became suspicious of him. And then when his stepdaughter died mysteriously, someone took it in their own hands and shot him while he was at the funeral. And then the part 2 is about the man who went to trial, was a defense lawyer for the man who shot Reverend Maxwell. And then the third part is about Harper Lee. You may know Harper Lee from the book To Kill a Mockingbird. She was the author to that, and I guess at the time of this trial, she went every day to the courthouse to watch what was going on, and apparently she was going to write a true crime novel about the court case, and it never showed up. And she's gonna talk about what happened to that book and why Harper Lee never published it. So far, it's really gripping. I liked the first part better than the second part so far. I saw another booktuber say she liked the first part and the third part's the best and didn't care for the middle, and so far I'm agreeing with her. Her name's Olive from A Book Olive. If I find the video, I'll link it down in the description below if you want to see her thoughts on that one. So that's what I'm reading. I gave up on Dragonfly and Ember by Diana Gabaldon. It was the first or the second book in the Outlander series, and I have mixed feelings about the first book. I didn't care too much about it when I first read it and then thought it was just okay when I read it a second time. And then I tried reading the second book because I thought I wanted to finish the series. And I just couldn't get into it because it was too much exposition and descriptions and that sort of thing. And I just gave up about 120 pages. So anyway, there is that. So my book hauls from my library is kind of different. I've been really into nonfiction lately, so I got a pile of that. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm also into books that are set in the South or Southern Gothic novels. I mostly read Southern books. I haven't read too much in the Southern Gothic section. So there's that, and I decided to mostly go with those two themes today. I did grab a couple other books that were YAs and historical fiction, which I also like. So let's go through my book hauls today, okay? I'm going to start with the nonfiction first. And that first one is What Just Happened by Charles Finch, Notes on a Long War. It's about the author who, when the pandemic started last year and everything started shutting down, he started writing notes every day about what was happening to himself and in society and current events as they were going on. And then he wrote a book about what he wrote about in his observations, and that kind of grabbed my attention, mostly because the title was interesting, because what just happened, which I think most of us were saying over the last year. So that one is that one. And then the next one is Volunteers Growing Up in the Forever War by Jared W. Alexander. So the authors come from a long line of people who served in the military, and he grew up expecting to do that as well. And as soon as he turned 18, he signed up for the Marine Corps and was sent overseas, and he kind of grew disenchanted with what he saw and what he experienced, and started to wonder why we were doing what we were doing overseas. And this is his thoughts and experiences on that. And I mostly grabbed this book because I've been especially interested in military fiction and nonfiction lately, in the last couple of years, and I find it interesting to read about soldiers' experiences. So I don't know too much about this one. I know it was on the short list for a nonfiction prize not too long ago. I think it was 2 years ago, but it's called Islands of Abandonment, Nature Rebounding in the Post-Human Landscape by Cal Flynn. So I'm guessing this one is about nature. So the summary says, what happens in the absence of humans, in ghost towns and exclusion zones, in no man's lands and post-industrial hinterlands? What happens when nature is allowed to reclaim its place? Some of the only truly feral cattle in the world wander along an abandoned island off the northernmost tip of Scotland. A variety of wildlife not seen in many lifetimes has rebounded on the irradiated grounds of Chernobyl. Rare orchids and endangered mammals proliferate in a narrow, demilitarized zone on the island of Cyprus. Exploring the extraordinary places where humans no longer live, or where they survive only in tiny, precarious numbers, Islands of Abandonment give us a glimpse of what nature gets up to when we're not there to see it. So that was really interesting, and I want to see what happens when nature is left alone to its own devices, which we don't do quite as much anymore, and probably should, because our nature resources are depleting rapidly and we should probably care more about what happens to it. So there is that. Alright, so I am going to go to the random bits that I got, since it's a smaller pile. The first one is by Nancy Thayer, and it's A Very Nantucket Christmas. This one has 2 books in it. One's a Nantucket Christmas and an Island Christmas. I picked this one up because even though I like Christmas, I don't really read too many Christmas books or too many Christmas movies. I've seen a lot more in the last couple of years, but not recently. And I want to read more Christmas books because I usually read the same book every year, and I want to expand my horizons. And obviously from the titles, these Christmas books are set in Nantucket in America on the East Coast, and it's about a couple people who live there and want to find love and all sorts of things. So we'll see about that one. These other 2 are kind of survivalist and historical fiction. The first one is The Perfect Place to Die. It was kind of a creepy cover. I didn't see the cover when I first picked it up. The title caught my attention, and then I pulled the cover off and I was like, oh, that's creepy. But it's based on historical events. I think a couple of the 2 main characters are fictionalized, of course, but this girl's friend moves to Chicago and she disappears, and the girl's friend wants to know what happened to her, and she goes to Chicago searching for her, and she discovers a house of horrors, which turns out to be H.H. Holmes and his mansion where he murders people, and she's trying to find the truth behind the mysterious horrors that happen there. So sorry, I zoned out there for a minute. So that's The Perfect Place to Die by Bryce Moore. It's actually a young adult novel, which I'm kind of surprised they put that cover there. So there's that one. And then this one is called Escape from the Everglades, a high water novel. So this one is set in the Everglades in Florida. This kid gets mauled and nearly dies from an alligator attack in the Everglades, and he never wants to go back in there again, but he has to live near the Everglades because his family lives there and he has no way of avoiding it. For whatever reason, one of his friends decides to go into the Everglades, and he decides to go in and search for him. And so he decides not to leave the Everglades until he finds out what happens to his friend and whether she died or whether she just went missing for other reasons. So that's kind of interesting. It kind of reminds me a mix of Dream Craighead George and Gary Paulson. So we'll see if that's what it's like in the book. From the cover, it kind of gives me the vibes from The Maze Runner. So I don't know what's going on in this book. We shall see. Okay, so the next one is the set in the South/Southern Gothic books. So here we go. The first one is a Fanny Flagg novel called A Redbird Christmas, another Christmas book. I've actually never read any of her books. I know she wrote Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. Side note, I usually call tomatoes tomatoes because one of my parents was from England and I grew up calling them tomatoes, and then as I grew older I realized Americans don't call them tomatoes, and I didn't want to confuse people in the video by calling them that. So that's why I said tomatoes instead of tomatoes. But anyway, so this one is set, where is it? I think it's in Alabama, but it's by this river, and this person goes down there to live there for whatever reason. I think something bad happens, and it's during Christmas time and kind of heals from whatever trauma they were going through. So that's interesting. This other one, I started to read the series, but I never actually finished it. It's the Charlene Harris books, the Sookie Stackhouse novels. Dead Until Dark is the first one. I may or may not finish reading these ones. I kind of got annoyed with Sookie about halfway through the book, or halfway through the series, because she's kind of wishy-washy at times and goes back and forth with the people she likes, and then wonders why they don't like her or nobody likes her. But they're kind of interesting. That Sookie, the main character, can read minds. She's done that, been able to do that ever since she was a child, and being able to read her other minds has kind of really messed with her mind, because she knows what other people think of her, and it caused her to drop out of school and had to make do with being a waitress. And then at the start of the book, she meets a vampire, and at this point vampires have come out to the public for a couple years now, and she's always wanted to meet a vampire, and because of that she gets pulled into the underworld of supernatural creatures, and different murders happen in each book, and she's there to solve it, as well as being involved with these different supernatural creatures. So that is Charlene Harris. Oh, and it's set near, what's it called? New Orleans, Louisiana. So that's pretty cool. This next book I read a very, very long time ago. I think in my early teens. I actually saw I don't know if it's a movie or a show, because when I first watched it, it was on VHS, and they didn't separate the episodes in the VHS. So, I always called it a movie, but I think it's actually was a TV show. But it's Christie by Catherine Marshall. So Christie lives in the turn of the century, 20th century. She decides that she wants to go on a mission trip to Tennessee, into the hollers where they need a teacher. And she goes there, and she realizes that life isn't what she expected, that there's all these beautiful mountains, but there's also a lot of tragedy and struggle, and she's trying to balance her ideals with what she's experiencing in the Smoky Mountains. And I really love the way she's written this. I think it's loosely based on the author's mother, who went to the Smoky Mountains to teach, but I'm not quite sure how much is truth and how much is not. But I really loved the book when I first read it, and I really loved the show. This one is definitely a Southern Gothic one. It's called The Toll by Sherry Priest. Southern Gothic horror with a contemporary twist. The cover is kind of spooky, and I think it was popular not too long ago. So we shall see about that one. The next one is The Bourbon Thief, a family with bourbon in its blood and blood on its hands. And isn't that cover cool? From what I remember, there's this guy, and for whatever reason, he has this bottle of bourbon that's like over 100 years old, and it somehow gets stolen, and he's trying to get it back. And I think there's murders and mysteries and set in the South. I wonder where it's from. Louisville, I think. Somewhere down south. I think it's a familial story. It starts at the beginning around Civil War and then goes on. So that's kind of cool. The next two books are Flannery O'Connor books. I've never actually read any of her works, but I know she mostly writes short stories and poetry, but she did write a couple novels, and I guess they're considered Southern Gothics. They are The Violent Buried Away and Wise Blood. I don't know much about either one of those, but I know I've been wanting to read them forever. So we will see how those go. I have a lot of reading to do, and usually when I check out a bunch of books from the library, I get overwhelmed, and then I end up not reading the majority of what I read. I also checked out a movie. Well, I have some movies from one of the libraries that I need to watch, but I also checked out another movie called Dante's Peak with Pierce Brosnan in it and the lady from the Terminator movies. I guess it's one of those 90s nature survival movies. So I may or may not watch it. I'll probably watch it with my husband because he tends to watch more movies than I do, and we like to watch movies together. So we shall see. Have you read any of these books, and what did you think of them? If you liked what you saw here, please give me a like and a comment below, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. Thanks. Bye.